Hi, and welcome back to another episode of DSC's Charity Questions podcast, where we invite experts from around the sector to share their thoughts on a myriad of different topics. And today we're talking about major donors and the idea of getting income from individuals. And really, we couldn't ask for a better crowd. We're one person short to have the full Rich Expectations crew. But today I'm really happy to be here with, firstly, Professor Beth Breeze, who's the principal of Harris Manchester College in Oxford, after a successful tenure at Kent, building the Centre for Philanthropy. Also spent 10 years as a fundraiser and charity manager, and a big contributor to DSC with a few books and many other bits of literature as well. And alongside Beth, we've got Theresa. And I must say, if you're watching on YouTube, Theresa's in a lovely, lovely room with some lovely books behind her as well. And in her own right is a well-regarded philanthropy expert, having undertaken pioneering research into the motivations of the wealthy giving to our sector, and of course is a leading advisor to non-profits on this strategic planning and philanthropy area. So guys, I've not had any major donor fundraisers on, and I'm very excited for this. Some of you may be familiar with the books they've been involved in, and as I just mentioned, there's a new one out, Rich Expectations, which is why they're both here today. So welcome to the podcast, you two. Yeah, Theresa's holding it up. Yeah, welcome to the podcast, guys. How are you feeling?
Thanks very much. Delighted to be here.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. Great stuff. So let's just kind of jump straight in. I wanted to go into the deep end with this whole idea of finding major donors. Now, I can write a good bid. I can write a good grants application. I can schmooze someone that exists to give me money. But finding those people that don't exist to give money is still an area in fundraising that is definitely a gap for me. And so, Beth, I'm going to go to you first, if that's okay. And I just want to talk about this idea. So charities have to kind of communicate this shared purpose to wealthy donors. And I've always felt that I might be kind of pressuring them or maybe even making them feel guilty. And so how can charities reach out to wealthy donors without making them feel like that?
Sure. Thanks, George. And thanks for having us on here to talk about this new research. I think what you've just described is really common. I think a lot of people misunderstand fundraising as some kind of begging or harassing or, pestering people, trying to make them do something that they don't actually want to do. And big news is you can't make people do things they don't want to do. You can't persuade somebody to voluntarily give away their money. So I think we can park those ideas and those misunderstandings of what fundraising is to begin with, and actually take a much more positive view that there are people out there for whom being generous, sharing their money, their time, their expertise, and showing practical support for charities really matters to them. They do want to do it. So what you're looking for is that alignment with people who care about your cause. So if somebody's passionate about the ballet and your cause is to do with snow sports, it's not that they're not generous, but there's no alignment there with what they care about. And by the way, they can care about that for many different reasons. It could be because as a child, this was very influential in their life, or perhaps they received help from that organisation, or they have a loved one who's experienced that illness. So it's usually quite autobiographical why people have this alignment. So you're looking for those people who have already got common cause with you. And of course, then as a good fundraiser, you're going to try and build that to an even stronger and stronger connection. And I'll just give you one metaphor or one sort of visual image that might help. And it's not mine, it's from Stephen Lee, who's a fellow fundraising scholar. He says, when you're a good fundraiser, you're not trying to twist someone's arm up their back and make them do something they don't want to do. Instead, you put your arm around their shoulder and together you go and make good things happen. And I find that an incredibly useful image when I think about talking to major donors, and I hope others do too.
Yeah, I like that idea. Go on, Theresa, you're going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I obviously I completely agree with that. And I think I've never thought of fundraising as begging or twisting people's arms. I see it much more as giving people the opportunity to be involved in something really exciting, really important, really worthwhile, whether it's in their very small local community or as a global international development organization. So I think it's I'm here to offer you something really terrific, not beg you. And I'm also a great believer in that old fundraising adage, and I have no idea who originally expressed it, but if you want money, ask for advice. Want advice, ask for money. If you think about it, Yes, so it's very flattering to people to be asked for their advice. It's very sort of shrewd because you're recognizing their expertise or knowledge of a particular sector or whatever. So, and just this is a sort of technical point, but I think when you introduced the question, you talked about raising money from individuals who don't exist necessarily to give it away. But of course, a number of quite major donors, it's not that they exist to give money away, but they will have set up family trusts, which of their nature will be charitable.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're getting into the areas I want to get into now, and so picture me. I'm a small charity. Yeah, I'm relying on grants. Maybe I've even had a government contract. Potentially, I'm feeling a little bit of a lack of resilience. I'm a small or medium-sized charity. What would you say, Theresa, about how I get in the room then with potential major donors? Kind of more on what you're saying, obviously, I guess. But
it's more. Yes, and as with the major donors, I mean, it was implicit in what Beth says, but finding out about them is research. I think, and there's increasingly it's astonishing and probably a bit frightening to many people what one can find out in the public domain, and then you sort of join the dots.
Yes.
One advantage of being in a relatively small place is that so many people know other people and have overlapping trustees and connections and all of that. And the local paper will be a huge source of information, and also, of course, local community foundations.
Yeah.
Good
idea.
Can help enormously, and I think. Sort of perhaps persuading trustees that part of their role is to be an ambassador, which I think is important for large organisations as well. There's a legal responsibility, and they may have functional responsibilities such as treasurer or lawyer or whatever. But safeguarding, absolutely. But I think they can also host things, show people around the organisation. And this is a terrific organisation. Come and have a look at the work that they do.
Exactly.
Have quite modest events, people's houses, to explain the work. So I think people can be a bit defeatist about this.
I agree, and I think it's a limiting belief almost in that area. And I said it, didn't I? I started with that. And it sounds like we're trying to find this emotional connection to try and make it as kind of feel more personal, right, rather than transactional. Now, I wanted to ask you maybe how we do that, but maybe I don't know. That is obviously a question I want to ask, but maybe if there's an example as well, put you on the spot there, but you don't have to provide an example.
It's a sort of overall example, but when COVID happened, whatever word we use, there was a definite switch, as it were. I think this is right, Beth, correct me. No, don't correct me, because it was spoil my point. There was a definite switch to more local giving. People could see the impact of COVID
I felt that, as a trustee of a small charity.
And maybe they couldn't travel, so they were more out in the village or town or whatever. And they, in some cases, suddenly realised a local and, if you like, therefore emotional collection. There are people where I live who are homeless. There are people where I live who are struggling now. And that's an example of where an emotional connection.
I think we're building this picture, aren't we? And I think this is like a true partnership, you could call it, between donors and charities, actually, where it's mutual, isn't it, in many ways, although, of course, a financial benefit towards one side. And so alongside these things you've mentioned already, Theresa, and maybe you want to add to this afterwards, Beth, as well, Beth, like what would a true partnership between donors and charities look like in practice then?
I think it's about mutual respect.
Yeah.
It's about donors who really enjoy learning about the work.
Yeah.
It's about the opportunity to, in some cases, link with other donors. And it's about meeting people and the people who, in a slightly jargony way, this way, sort of deliver the mission. I mean, it's sometimes a shock to fundraisers to learn that people don't necessarily only want to meet them, however charming. And
how dare you say that? Us fundraisers, we're the most important role.
Quite so.
No, I think that's right, isn't it? That final connection.
And therefore, it's very important that there's an internal understanding, if you like, a corporate culture, where everybody sees the relationships with particularly major donors as a core part of their role. And indeed, I would even like to see it in the job description, but that may be because it's too fragile. If it depends on the fundraiser going to the director of programs, or if it's a small organisation who is running and said it would be absolutely wonderful if you would please do X. That's not as good as the, if you like, more formal expectation that they will do X. Obviously, it's to be agreed. Come and meet this person.
Yes.
Come with me to go and talk to him or her about
I know what you mean.
This particular project which they've been supporting, but they want to hear it from you, not through me.
Yeah, it's very true, actually, isn't it? And it's kind of
just to build on that. I mean, the relationships that people have. That so you mentioned earlier, George. And I just wanted to underline that point, and Theresa mentioned it too. That donors are looking for life fulfilling, life enhancing, meaning of life experiences, and they get them from philanthropy. I mean, even there's many different causes. Some are more obviously joyful. If you support an orchestra, you support a museum, you support sports. But the ones that are much tougher and dealing with sadder causes, you can still feel better about yourself and the world if you've made some effort to help with it. So that's one of the reasons that the previous book in the series was called Richer Lives, because it was a sort of a fairly feeble pun on that they're rich because they've got money, but they're looking for enriching life experience. So you have a richer life as a result of being a donor. And Theresa's absolutely right that connecting with the staff, the deliverers, the frontline people is a key part of that. I mean, the fundraiser, and I've done a lot of my research has been studying fundraisers, and I love fundraisers, but the donors do not necessarily want to deal with them. The fundraiser is the choreographer, the connector, the person who does the research, puts the right people in the room together. But if you're a donor who is fascinated by neuroscience, you want to meet the neuroscientist. Or if you're a donor who's fascinated with dinosaurs, you want to meet the paleontologist, you want to meet the kind of the sciences, the museum person. So the fundraiser, a good fundraiser, knows when to get out of the room and to let the magic happen between the potential donor and the member of the staff who they'll find most interesting. And that is one of our findings throughout this series, that the relationships you get with frontline staff and with fellow donors and with volunteers, and sometimes with beneficiaries, if appropriate. Let's say they're a musician rather than a vulnerable child, where it'd be inappropriate. So that's really, really important, that fundraisers know when to leave the room. And I've used a metaphor of the swan. On the top it looks like fundraisers just, you used the word schmooze earlier. They're just kind of schmoozing, chatting, having canapes, but that's just the surface. Under the surface, the fundraiser is working so hard to find those people who have the ability to support at a high level, who believe in the cause, and who've got some kind of connection to the cause. So that's my ABC: ability, belief, and connection. And bad fundraising is when you only go for the A. You get the rich list and you fire off letters to everybody on it. Yes, they're rich, but you've got no knowledge about their belief in the cause or any way of connecting to them. So these are all hopefully helpful things for those who are really starting out fresh, looking to find and build relationships with major donors.
I think that's completely true. Or just to say, and I think if you can weave those strands in, just as Beth said, so there's relationship with the organisation in some way, ideally the staff or the musicians, for example, in the orchestra, to pursue that example, and the other donors and their opportunities to learn about particular repertoire or whatever. And so you've got the players pursuing the example of the orchestra, other donors who share the experience and feel inspired or whatever, and the senior staff, if you like. That's very strong. It's very hard to withdraw. I mean, apart from the general rule that people, once committed, if they feel it's going well, on the whole, stay if you look after them properly. But in that example, you wouldn't only, so to speak, we're withdrawing from the organisation in the abstract and maybe the senior staff, but the other donors who several times a year, and in the example, the players or the sports people or
the animals in the animal charity,
or people at a university, people supporting academics or academic research or scientific research. Well, sorry, academic, scientific, but medical research.
Yeah. And so when you say ability, ABC, ability, financial, having the ability to financially give, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, usually that, and also having a peer group. And influence. So, you have givers and you have getters, and often they're the same people. So somebody who's already given you a large amount of money, why would they not want to tell their friends what a great experience they had and how it enriched their life and how they enjoyed meeting the scientists and the sports people and so on? So, we also make a mistake when we think that we treat a donor like just an individual. As Theresa said, they're often in a family, but they also have peers, they also have networks. So, your major donors can also be your incredibly helpful opening doors to other people, and they're your best advocates because they're not on your payroll, so it's not their job to tell people, and they also have a moral authority. As a fundraiser, you're being paid by the charity, and you really, of course, you passionately believe in it, but you have a mortgage to pay. Whereas the fundraiser, the donor who's given the money, if they tell their friends this is a good thing to do, it's a very different kind of request to the fundraiser asking. And in my first job, actually, I remember being told that if you can try and get somebody to ask a peer, that would be great. And if the peer says, I'd really rather not do that, you could say, that's fine, look, I'm the fundraiser, it's my job, but I promise you I'll have to take a 0 off if I do the asking. Whereas if you do the asking, you can maybe even add a 0. And if you say that with a smile, it can be quite a helpful way of getting encouraging your major donors to help you out with the asking.
I mean, we ask for referrals as well.
That story, but I think there's sort of something in between where somebody says, I really, really don't want to ask. You can perhaps persuade them, in following up what you just said, sort of the first part of the story. You can ask them, well, it would be wonderful, quite understand, but I'd very much like to get to know this person better. Perhaps you could invite him for coffee, if you know him or her well, or just for an initial introduction to open the door, so that they know that you are involved with us and support us and so on. Getting the words out, will you give us X? Well, I wouldn't. But you don't necessarily have to do, because what we want to engineer is a sort of process of getting to know people, because I do actually think sometimes that's a mistake. I don't know, Beth, if you've...
No, absolutely. And you're reminding me of when I did the fundraiser research, those introductions 99 times out of 100 are incredibly helpful, as you describe. But going back to our earlier conversation about those who have a negative perception of fundraising, sometimes, and this has been reported to me in interviews, those introductions are made by people who don't really like or understand fundraising. And they said, look, here we go, Bob, I'm introducing you to Beth, the fundraiser. Watch your wallet, she's a fundraiser. Or, I'll leave you to it while she does the dirty work. And these are genuine, statements. They thought, no, don't make the introduction if you're then going to shoot me in the foot and make it harder for me to ask. So it has to be done with an understanding of generosity and philanthropy. We call it the culture of philanthropy, where everybody in the organisation understands why we need donated income, how fundraising works, and is on board and positive. And you need a culture of philanthropy from the person who picks up the phone, the person who does the website, the volunteers. And there's some lovely research showing that the stronger your culture of philanthropy, the more you raise. It's not good enough to hire one-star fundraiser and then expect them to do it on their own.
They're we've got so-and-so.
And then everyone else abdicates responsibility or even is anti-fundraising and anti-philanthropy. And then they blame that one poor person in the corner who's trying to raise the money. Fundraising is a team sport.
Same as delivering, right? We all understand that.
Absolutely. And the person whose job title is fundraiser, it's up to them to have a strategy and to follow it and to explain to everyone else, okay, could you come to this lunch or could you do this? So it's their responsibility, but they can't do it all by themselves.
And I think in this corporate culture, as I referred to it yesterday, but of philanthropy, which I should have added, it really is from as you say, the switchboard operator. Probably don't have that now, but you know what I mean. People and trustees. And indeed, one's come across organisations where this is not always the case.
Yeah. But more positively, I mean, I mentioned a moment ago that the last book was called Richer Lives, but the one where we're talking about today is called Rich Expectations, and I thought you might want to know a little bit about why we called it that. Because in the research, and by the way, the research is based on very extensive surveys and in-depth interviews with almost 100 UK donors, and we've gone back to them. Theresa did the first iteration just around 2000, then 10 years or so ago we did it together, and then we did it again more recently with Roger Davis, our third co-author. So it's a bit like 7 Up, the TV programme, where you go back to some people again and again.
That's cool, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, but we also bring in some new people. So each time we've tried to say, well, what's the main theme? And the main theme 10 years ago was this feeling of enrichment. And my life is better because I'm giving money away, which is actually quite countercultural. Most people think the more money you have, the happier you are. And actually, there's loads of research that shows being generous is good for your well-being and your health and your networks. But this time round, the main finding was that the amount of expectations that exist on all sides, and they're nearly always implicit. So donors, expect that charities will spend their money well, will communicate with them, will be honest with them, will keep them informed, and so on. Charities expect that their donors will trust their expertise, will give in a way that is most helpful to them, which is unrestricted and longer term. The public have expectations of rich people that even if they're paying tax, they will also be generous on top. Politicians have expectations that philanthropists will step in. So we just felt that it kept coming up in lots of different directions, all these expectations. And sometimes the problem was they weren't made clear. And so donors weren't doing what charities hope for, or charities weren't doing what donors hope for. So we felt that if we could spell out some of these expectations and misunderstandings, and sometimes we think there are expectations that are not there. So one of them is that people often imagine that if someone's giving you a lot of money, then they're going to try and be, kind of a bit pushy and say, well, now you should do it my way. And we really didn't find that. I mean, the kind of what donors expect is to be involved and engaged, and if appropriate, let them come in, let them meet the beneficiaries. It's easier with musicians than with, say, vulnerable children, but when appropriate, come in, know what's going on. But people really don't, on the whole, say, because I've given a large sum of money, therefore I want to tell you what to do or how to spend your money, because actually they wouldn't have given you the money if they didn't trust you, especially serious amounts of money.
I wanted to ask this,
they would believe you're well run. So please,
No, I think you've answered it already.
I think, as I touched on earlier, that people want to learn. They will come to events which explain how a project worked. And in the days when I was involved in international development, I remember the organisation, we sort of took what we knew was a bit of a risk, but the trustees thought it was a terrible risk. And we published, we had a quarterly, actually biannual newsletter, and we gave a report about a project that failed. Well, failed in the sense that it hadn't achieved expectations, what have you. And we were completely honest, and this is what we learned, and this is why we did X in the wrong place, and we hadn't consulted the women, and et cetera, et cetera. We had a fantastically positive feedback. I mean, it's obvious, otherwise I wouldn't be telling the story this way. But it really was, because it was about donors saying things, like, we felt you really respected us. You took us into your confidence. You can imagine all the things. And nobody said, you idiots, how could you make that mistake?
No, it's a really good example, Theresa. And again, I'm thinking about the data that backs up this kind of thing. So, this idea that donors want to throw their weight around. Well, most of them give anonymously, at least some of the time. So the figure this time was, I think, it's about 72% have made at least one anonymous gift, and some do it regularly. Some do all of their gifts anonymously.
Wow.
So you can't throw your weight around if you're anonymous. The other trend that's worth mentioning is collective giving. So there's an understanding that if you club together with other people who share your concern, then you can do more. But again, your influence is diluted. So if I club in with 5 or more of my friends, or even one other friend, I've already reduced my personal influence, which I think again speaks to the fact that they're not looking for influence, they're looking for impact. So I think it'd be great if charities could stop being scared or worried about major donors and see them as a partner rather than somebody they have to impress and keep keep on side, because they are on your side if they're supporting you.
I think that's right. And although this is a slightly different aspect of this, I think as we found, and that was consistent, I think, through all the editions in this series, that there's a great sort of cynicism that some people only give for recognition or to get into a, I don't know, socially glitzy network or have honours or something. And another side of that is that somehow they have some secret way of giving, so that they end up better off with some complicated tax scheme than if they'd never given any money at all. And that, as we found, is simply not the case.
Yeah.
Well, it's hilarious, really, because if charities were such a great tax dodge, you can imagine how the tax advisors would be all over it, and most people would be giving. If it were personally beneficial, especially if it was personally financially beneficial to give to charity, then 100% of rich people would be giving, because all the tax people would know it and give that advice. As it stands, most people give a little, but very few give a lot.
Yes.
I mean, there are 2,500 billionaires in the world, and only about 222 of them have signed the Giving Pledge, which is to give publicly commit to give away half or more of your giving, of your wealth. Now, does that mean 90% of tax advisors are not doing their job properly, who haven't managed to persuade their clients to do this clever, sneaky thing that somehow enriches you? Or perhaps it doesn't sneakily enrich you. Perhaps it is generous. Perhaps there is such a thing as altruism. So I really think we have to pinch this idea in that, push back on this idea.
That is, unfortunately, I think, very much the stance of certain media.
Yeah. Well, this is it, right?
And it is absolutely not helpful to the world of philanthropy. If people, I mean, Beth's book in defense of philanthropy is very much focuses on this whole area of the idea that people are ill motivated pursuing that. And if some journalists, let us say, were only slightly less cynical, and then they're surprised that people don't want to stick their head above the parapet.
Yeah.
Well, why would you if you think?
But sadly, Theresa, it's not just journalists, and even within charities, you find people who say, what's going on in the fundraising department? I feel uncomfortable about that. What do they really want? And that's really tricky when the cynicism is inside, and that goes back to the culture of philanthropy point. If you bring donors into the building or to events, and some of the staff are actively hostile, even if they think they're hiding it well, donors can smell that a mile off, and so you need to have those conversations in the charity. Has anybody here got a problem with rich donors? Let's talk about it. And they'll probably talk about completely legitimate things, that reasonable things like source of wealth and the unequal distribution of wealth, and you can say, I agree with all of that. However, here's a rich person who wants to give us some. They're not holding on to it, they're not hoarding it, they're not asking for unreasonable influence or power or whatever it might be. Now, do you still feel worried? Can we be a bit more nuanced in what our concern is? Because if you've just got a general critique of capitalism, that's completely fair enough, but don't bring it to your workplace if your workplace is a charity that needs income from major donors, because that's not helpful.
Yeah.
I think, and what's fascinating about that also is that as becomes clear from the research, and you talked about creating the emotional connection. We talked about it earlier on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's about a long-term. I mean, a successful relationship is long-term, and it's very rare that somebody will make their, as it were, biggest gift as for their first gift.
True.
They will want to get to know the charity or recipient, whatever it is, and it will gradually build up, and then. Often, and then there may be some big project or some big anniversary, which can be a hook or something where you can make a case for upping it. But it only will be a long-term relationship if we come back to the involvement of not just the fundraiser,
the whole organisation.
The whole organisation.
Yeah, and I think, Beth, you mentioned like the membership groups. And I think that's a really cool idea, actually, because it allows you to reach more people. And I think that maybe helps potentially with the kind of getting support angle. It maybe changes the conversation a little bit. Have you got any more examples of maybe we've got a major donor here, how they could potentially help us to get more support out there?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we did ask in the research how people felt about fundraising. So, and there are definitely some people who hate it, and you can't make people do it again voluntarily. But there's some interesting figures that people might be interested to hear. So, we said if you've helped the charities that you donate to also ask for money, what have those experiences been like? And 25% said they've been good experiences. 45% said they've been a mixture of good and bad. 25% had never done it, and only 4% said it had been entirely bad. Now, they may be the most vocal.
Yes.
They may be the ones setting the tone. Don't ask your donors to give, they hate it, they don't want to do it. But they really are the minority. And, when people have good and bad experiences, we'll talk about it. Why did you feel awkward? Did you feel on the spot because somebody asked you a question? You asked your friend to support a cause, and they asked you for detailed information you didn't have. So what you can do is support your richer donors and say, okay, here's how you'd respond to that, which is basically, that's a great question, I'll get back to you.
Yes.
And then the charity can send an expert or can send someone else, maybe making sure that they're armed with some basic facts and figures. Maybe, as Theresa said, ask them to make introductions rather than make ask. So it's really all, like anything, it's all in the preparation. So don't land your supporters and don't put them in an awkward position. But I think the fact that so many, 70% said it had either been entirely good or a mixture of good and bad, shows that this really is a resource for you. And if you've only got one or two major donors, then you really do need their help to reach their networks. It's the quickest way, rather than trying to find people out there who you've never heard of, you've got no connection to, and just approaching them cold. That's not going to be as successful as going through your existing warm contacts.
Can I just, there's a great TED talk by Cara Logan, who maybe you've heard of, is a major donor, fundraiser in America. And she said something brilliant that stayed with me to this day, and about phrasing difficult asks. And she uses the sentence, would you consider supporting our charity at the £1 million level? And she says, keep your face like this. And I think that just hugely resonates with me in terms of any difficult ask, personal life, work life. And do you think we can be a little bit like that with sometimes just have the big ask, have the big question?
Would you consider is a really nice phrasing. And of course, you wouldn't get to that point until, as Theresa mentioned, a long period of research and relationship building. And, that they have the ability to give it, they believe in your work, you've got the connection. So the ABC is in place.
Yeah, I like it.
So and you're never quite sure the amount to ask. It's one of the questions I ask in all my research. And the reply tends to be that we ask for too little. Because we ourselves as fundraisers are not of wealth normally, we think, gosh, £1 million, that's so much. And then it turns out they could have given a few million, 10 million. So we need to be careful that we don't under ask.
I've actually had that experience that I'd asked for £1 million for a particular person for a particular organisation. And he fished, those were the days, a cheque out of it. He knew I'd come to ask, and indeed he also knew that it shouldn't have been me, it should have been a higher form of life in the institution. Anyway, but it was me because nobody else would. And he got this cheque out of his jacket pocket. And he said, because he's a very nice man, a very shrewd and an experienced giver, he said, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, damn it, I should have asked for more.
Well, he took a check and crossed one of the zeros off and gave it to
you. Almost.
But he then said, I had it ready because even if you had asked for more, I wasn't going to give it at this point because there are other people who should give. And when we get to the end of this campaign, I may give another $1 million, but I'd like to see. He wasn't saying I'll see how the institution does. It was how the campaign goes, and that other people have contributed.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just ask George, your thing? I mean, so would you consider is lovely phrasing, and then you said the thing about just look. And I went on a DSC training course, Director of Social Change training course, when I was a fundraiser many years ago, and it was called Making the Ask or something like that. And it was so powerful. It was a few hours, and one of the things the trainer made us do was practice saying out loud, "Would you give me? Would you consider giving us £1 million?" And you're only doing it in a role play scenario with someone else who's on the course. But I would again encourage people who've never asked for big donations to find a friend to role play with, a colleague, do it in the mirror, because you can feel incredibly awkward. And so practice saying it. Say, look, it's been lovely getting to know you over this past year. I'm so glad you were able to visit the charity a couple of months ago, and it was great to see you again at our dinner last week. Now, as you know, we're working towards this big campaign, and would you consider giving us £1 million? And the thing they said in the DSC training that I've never forgotten is, and then stop talking. And the jokey thing they said was, whoever talks next loses.
That's true.
Now, that's a joke, because obviously no one loses when a gift is given. But I understood the point they were making, because if you then go, well, maybe £1 million was too much, how about £500,000? Or, oh, sorry, we expect it. If you start rowing back and apologising, then you've lost the power of that.
Credibility, isn't it? Yeah.
Let them speak next.
And in fact, it depends obviously on the kind of organisation and how the trustees are and all of that. But I think that the role play, and I've been at conferences with role players and so on, which I think is an excellent idea, is something I have in the past done trustee training on exactly this topic, and having a role play and possibly bringing in, if you think they just won't play, bringing in a colleague or a friend or whatever to act the part of the donor can be hugely important, because I think also that one shouldn't forget is that people, not in my experience anyway, and I think not in our research, are not usually cross or resentful about it being assumed that they've got more money than they have. So they might not say, I mean, absolutely Beth's point about when you've asked, don't say anything, don't fill the gap in silence. This is the advice you get if you're going to be a witness in court, I understand as well. Don't, because of nervousness, qualify your answer, which may then diminish its impact. But because the response to, if people are sort of, they love the organisation and like the work that it does, but £1 million is a bit of a stretch. It's for them to say, well, I think, but of course, the work is wonderful, and perhaps we could spread it over 4 years, or perhaps we could, and they will make suggestions about how this can be managed.
And if you don't stop talking, you won't hear properly the answer, because if you're panicking, I think a lot of fundraisers hear a no when it's not really a no. It's a no, not yet, or a no, not that amount, or no, not for that project, or no, not until someone else asks me, or no, not until I've spoken to my family. So all of that work you've done to research and bring in the potential donor and build a relationship, if you hear a qualified no as an absolute no, then you've undermined all that work you've done. So after you've made the ask, stop talking, not only so you don't undermine your ask, but also so you can really listen to what they're saying, because chances are they're saying something that you can say, oh, that's completely fine, I'll come back next month with a rework proposal, or that's absolutely fine, I know you're in the process of selling your business, I'll contact you once that's done, or you're through that family wedding, or you're back from holiday, or whatever it might be. So really listening, the older days, 2 ears, 1 mouth, you've got to listen to what they're saying. And it's very rare that you've got all the way to an ask meeting and it's an absolute out and out no, I'm not at all interested in your charity, I'm never going to give. Something's gone really wrong in the process if you've got to that point. So chances are it's a qualified no.
So linked to that, again, some time ago, I was on the development board, sort of philanthropic board of an organisation, and there was an excellent sort of head of fundraising and director of development there, really outstandingly good. And she always arranged, she built up all the things that we've been talking about, so as to get to the point. And I think, she thought that this is for bigger organisations, I think, that nobody should ever say no to the chairman, the chief executive or whatever, because they're under the sort of all the fast swimming that you talked about underneath the water has gone on, so that by the time it gets to that point, all the homework has been done and you're almost certain to have got it right, what you're going to ask for, what project, all the points that Beth raised. And in this meeting, it was announced that the organisation had been given a very, very large gift, 2 million, it was some 20-something years ago.
Wow.
And the chairman, who knew what he was doing, was sort of teasing that he said to this terrific fundraiser. Well done for all the work you're doing. But I don't know why it's so hard. You say fundraising is so hard. I've made, I think, 4 major asks for this campaign in the last 6 months, and everybody has said yes. And I actually saw her looking at the jug of water, the 2 pins.
Yeah. Well,
the work of fundraisers is really hidden. Sorry, George, but
No,
I think that exactly that the number of people who don't realise that possibly even 2 years of work that's gone into
in this particular case, it was precisely so, 2 years.
And then the fundraiser gifts the chair or the CEO or the patron the opportunity to make the ask, but that doesn't mean they did the fundraising. It means
exactly.
they played a really important role of making the ask, but they didn't accidentally end up in a room with that person and know how much to ask for and at what time and for what project. So I think, again, we need some more honest conversations internally. And one thing I would say is that the head of fundraising really should be on the senior leadership team of a charity, however big or small it is, if they're not there, because they need to be there to say, well, come on, yes, you made the ask, but don't forget my team did all this work, or actually we can thank so and so who initially found that donor, who was only giving £5 a month until they did some research and discovered they had larger capacity. So you need someone to advocate for fundraising internally, and if they're not at the senior leadership table, then people will continue to have misunderstandings about how fundraising works.
Make it clear that in my example, the chairman knew exactly. I mean, he knew what went into it.
It was a joke.
So one second. So I'm just mindful. We've only got Beth for a few more minutes.
Okay.
And so we've spoken about widespread assumptions, particularly how charities position this. Any more widespread assumptions you want to quash while you're here today, both of you? Beth, maybe first.
I mean, I would give one, and it probably just echoes and underlines what I've been saying so far. But every gift that's given was asked for. There's really almost no such thing as an unprompted gift, because how could a donor know that a charity exists and is doing good work and needs the money? So even if it's fairly, sort of diffuse asking in terms of the charity building up its brand, having a good reputation, a website. So unprompted giving is pretty rare. So we need to think about both sides: the supply, yes, from the donors, but the demand from the fundraising. And that's why I've always studied both sides, the supply and the demand. And if there was one practical change that I'd like all charities to do so that they can make a better job of approaching major donors, that would be to invest in their fundraising function. Don't just think you can pay. Don't just think you can pay a small salary and leave someone to it. You've got to then give them a budget so that they can do their work. You've got to train them. There's all kinds of good courses. I want to put in a plug for the fundraiser apprenticeship, which is now run at the University of Chichester. I used to run it at the University of Kent. It's now at the University of Chichester. Just Google fundraiser apprenticeship Chichester.
When did it move? I didn't know it moved.
Just now, yeah. So the last cohort finished at Kent, and it starts at Chichester in January. It's almost free because the government subsidises apprenticeships. It's a 10-month course. It doesn't take that long. By the end of it, your junior fundraisers will have all the knowledge and skills and confidence to do good fundraising. So make sure you invest in your team, but also morally support them. When they come back from a no or they get a no's, it's hard fundraising. So my main request and ask for any charity would be understand fundraising as an investment, not a cost, and provide them with the practical and moral support that they need to do the job properly. And if they do their job properly, then your charity will have the resources it needs to fulfill its mission. And that's what matters.
Ability, belief, connection.
Thank you. Exactly.
We nailed it. ABCs. Theresa, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think the point about being on the senior team. Oh yes, it's about making sure it's if you like, the other side of the research about people's capacity to give, but it's about being realistic about what the charity could reasonably spend. An organisation that has a turnover. I mean, this is not a huge point, but it is one that often gets missed. That thinks we should ask X for. I know we've been talking about 1 million, but even 100,000 would be actually too much for a very small charity that hitherto their income has been 10,000 a year, and you couldn't make a realistic case for effective capacity to spend it. So I think it's a small point, but I have seen it in some of the local organisations with whom I've perhaps been peripherally involved, where it's complete fantasy that anybody would give them a huge sum, because they can't possibly make a case for growing in order to absorb the money in a short time.
But on the plus side, just to end on a positive note, don't think you have to be £100 million organisation to get £1 million. Because I did the million, and I know that's not what you're saying, Theresa, but just to give the other side of it. Yes, don't ask for £1 million if your turnover is 10,000. But if your turnover is a couple of million, you're 3, 5, 10, you can ask for £1 million, because many donors will think, well, I can make a bigger splash with that. I want to make a transformational impact. This is another key finding in all 3 iterations of this study. Why do you give? Because I really believe in the cause and I want to make something good happen. If they're a charity with a turnover 100 million or 500 million, even giving 1 million gets a bit lost in that. So actually the really big potential for major donors is in that kind of 5 to 10 million type area, where £1 million donation is really significant, can do something really good, and they trust you've got the capacity to use it. So don't be thinking it's just for the really big brand names who've got 100 million plus. If you've got a turnover of £1 million or more, you can be asking for big donations.
Nice.
I think that's right, and also one should have the resources, because as you said, what people want is to somebody says thank you, and you've really made a difference. I mean, that's no more than that is effective thanking, and which, of course, as you hope, will lead on to the next donation. But I think being able to show the impact, which does mean building into the project or program, whatever it is from the very beginning, ways of measuring.
Perfect. Well,
and that's part of the project cost.
Let's tie it up there, because I know Beth's got to go.
That's okay.
You can both be added on LinkedIn. Theresa Lloyd, Beth Breeze. Any other way you want our listeners to connect with you guys?
Read our books. I mean, and we both produce as many.
People can contact me through that.
What's your website, Theresa?
theresaloyd.co.uk.
Perfect. And books, Beth? Rich Expectations, obviously.
Rich Expectations. My book, The New Fundraisers, which is all about what other people are there out there who raise money, what kind of people are good at raising money. So The New Fundraisers and In Defence of Philanthropy, which Theresa mentioned. If you feel
terrific read.
Oh, thank you. If you feel that a lot of people around you just don't understand philanthropy and are quite negative and critical about it, have a read of In Defence of Philanthropy. It's full of stories and anecdotes, and I hope it helps you. And can I just finish by saying good luck to everybody. I love fundraisers. You make the world go round, and we're so everyone should be more grateful for the good work that you do, and good luck to you all.
Absolutely. Yes, and a shout out to Rodri, who couldn't be here today as well. Rodri Davies, who played.
We miss you, Rodri.
Yeah. Thank you so much, you two, and thank you to our listeners. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Charity Questions podcast, brought to you by the Directorate of Social Change. The SC provides training courses, publications, online funding databases, research, conferences, and lots of free resources just like this to the charity sector. If you want to get more involved with this podcast, follow us along on social media, where we announce the guests we have upcoming, and you can contribute your own questions for me to ask on the podcast. Thanks again for listening. See ya. Bye.